Hey Mike, welcome. I'm just bringing up the screen and making sure the OBS is there, but I'm assuming you can hear me even though I'm not not on the screen yet, but just kind of getting things started. All right. So, just gonna bring this out to the live chat at least initially, and there we go. I think. Okay, good. You can hear me. I've got a few different things kind of set up. Ah, good. We have people coming in. All right, great. Well, welcome. I'm kind of getting started now. Just a couple of housekeeping notes as this goes is that I'm doing this with my son right here. He's there. There's another computer just over here. Really, this computer is my wife's computer. That one over there is mine. This one works better for at least for the purposes of doing live chats and the like, because all you can see is a staircase behind me. But my son is currently watching YouTube videos just over here with his headphones on, but he might pop in every once in a while. And then we're doing this in between when I get a chance to. My daughter is currently at the Canadian equivalent of Girl Scouts, although at a somewhat higher level. She's it's called Pathfinders, and so she's part of that. So wherever you're checking in from, I'm curious, how warm or cold is it out there? Figure may as well do an icebreaker because I'm breaking ice off of everything. Today is the warmest day it's been all week. It is minus 14 Celsius outside right now, and which is about just a handful of degrees above 0 Fahrenheit, and that's the warmest it's been. It has been much colder than that throughout the week. I've actually my car didn't my car didn't start on Sunday, so all right. The you're coming in from Florida. You lucky person, you. Just in terms of being nice and warm. But the bonus is, I have clear access to pink foam up here. So if I want it, so I think we're good. So oh. Oh, yeah. The -3 is actually pretty cold for Surrey. Of course, those even though it is Canada, the West Coast doesn't usually get that cold. So welcome, Andy. Andy, I want to give you a shout out because I wanted to talk about one of the techniques that you used in the Down and Dirty Weathering contest last time. That you were using a sponge effect to get a really nice effect on the roof of a car with some oil paints, and I was wondering if you were going to show up. So you're getting a shout out tonight. So welcome, and. Just wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping. I also get to try something. I'm gonna do something here that I'm hoping kind of works, because since we're talking about paints, I didn't want to create a separate screen for. You might remember that the last time that I did this, I did something like this and showed a book or something like that. Now I didn't want to do a separate screen for every single paint that I wanted to do. So instead, I've actually created this mini cam, and so when we talk about paints, I've got it right here, and so I'm just starting with something that's pretty old school, right there, and and truthfully, I have it. I've never used it, and if you look carefully around the back here, this one is well settled out, and no amount of shaking has returned this flow coal paint back to any sort of usability. The people in my Model Railroad Club know that I do a lot of painting and things like that. So as they're paring down their collections, I get a lot of their old paint, which allows me to talk about paint lines that have been discontinued, and so that one's one of them. So I might actually start when we ask the question. Well, as the topic is, what paint do I use? And so I wanted to talk about what paints do we use, what things have we worked with. I want to start more or less broadly, although of course you've seen my videos, you know at least some of the paints that I do make use of, and I'm going to be talking about that. But this isn't about what I think is necessarily best. It's more along the lines of what paints are best. I've always said use the best paint for the job, and occasionally, just basic craft paint can be best for the job, depending on what you're doing. So that's kind of one of the things that I kind of wanted to talk about, and what people's experiences of certain brands are. And I may have certain ones here that you may not be aware of. I've got this actually enormous tray of paints, most of which I've tried. Some like the Flocal, this Flocal one. I haven't. I've tried the polyscale, which I also have here, but of course those are now discontinued. So I guess, and you know what? Before we get started, I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug here. You might have noticed on Ron Marsh's account, he's got this shelf, and I'm getting a little bit of an alert here. Is everybody hearing me okay, or are you getting some buffering going on? There was a little red flash saying that I'm potentially cutting out. So if you're here, if you can just check in and just let me know how the signal is going. So hopefully this isn't buffering out too much. It's still saying I'm doing reasonably well in terms of, I'm dropping frames. Okay, it says that I'm okay. Which is interesting, because usually my upload speed here is pretty good, but I was getting a little red flash, but hopefully that's kind of settled out. Okay, just kind of flag me if you. I'm going to keep an eye on that little green dot to make sure that everything's going okay. Anyway, let's go back to this. I'm going to give myself a shameless plug here. You might have noticed on Ron Marsh's channel, he's got this little shelf of Teespring that shows all of his merchandise. Well, you get that if with Teespring if you have 10,000 subscribers. And I mean, at this point, I'm currently hovering just under 900, so 10,000 is a little ways off for me. But I decided I came up with an idea for a Teespring shirt that I thought I'd kind of share with you. This is one of 4 Teespring shirts that I'm offering. Just for the fun of it. The link is down below, that if you want to check it out. But for those of you are taking a look at it, that I figured that if people can't tell the difference between a wheel set and a barbell, well, they might think you're working out. So I mean, I think that probably works out well. So anyway, I'm just kind of let's get back out of I want to get out of that shameless plug there. That's about as much as it is. So we're back into this. So I want to just sort of talk about this. How many of you have actually used the both the Floquil and I'm just going to put this here the polyscale paints at the same time? like these were the colors that if you were in model railroading, that these were the go-to colors, and yet both of these lines have now been discontinued. I remember checking out some of the chat lines or when these paints were discontinued, and you'd think that the world was ending. Now, any of you kind of have that experience that when it was announced that that these lines were being discontinued, that everybody was basically going out and buying whatever stock was left and kind of and hoarding it. Did any of you actually go out and hoard some of these paints? I think that's a good question. Good question to have. I mean, the one thing particularly about these, specifically these were model. They were paints designed for model railroaders, and when these were discontinued, there was this a bit of a panic, I suppose, as to, well, what are we going to paint with? Well, my reply to that, or my experience with that, is there are a lot of paints out there. Now, that having been said, the one real advantage to using a paint line like this is that when you wanted something of a particular paint line, you knew that when you picked it up, it was mostly matched to the color that you were looking for. And some paint lines have come in to try and bridge that gap, and there are a few here that I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at it. And there were a few that where are we here? There were a few that were manufactured. There was one called True Line Trains, and it looks like I left that one downstairs. And it was out for a little while, and then it was also discontinued, and there was that again. But most recently, and this is just of the model railroad specific ones, that our friends at Rapido up here in Canada have put out this Proto paint, and these ones are intended to be. Andy, you're right. When they're talking about like they're using a particular paint, but the paint is discontinued. That becomes a more of an issue of saying, well, I even find that watching some of the videos today that they're using paints that have since been discontinued. I mean, it's fine, because if it is the best paint for the job, it's fine. But if somebody's trying to replicate the work, it's a good idea to try and come up with different alternatives. Anyway, this one here is this paint I've not talked about before, either on any of my videos or even in live stream. But this is from Rapido, and they're called Proto paint, and the intention is that they're color matched to certain things. Like, for example, if you are painting CP rail from around the early '60s and before, there is this maroon color that they have. This is called CP Action Yellow, which is some of the yellow boxcars that they had were painted in this color, and so this is actual matched to that. I've had a chance to use these ones. They spray reasonably well. They're kind of a glossy finish. They mix well with alcohol-based thinners, so Tamiya X20A, denatured alcohol. They seem to work really well. Now, one thing I'll say: a lot of these paints say, "Oh, they're ready to go right out of the bottle," and that may be true if they're straight off the line. The trouble is, paints settle, they mix. It's always a good idea to have a thinner on hand. These ones do happen to thin reasonably well with just alcohol-based thinners. So, if you're looking for something that is trying to get an exact match, take a look at these ones. These Rapido Proto paints are certainly pretty good. There's sorry, I realized I've got the Canadian Pacific Tuscan. This paint doesn't actually belong to me. It belongs to a friend of mine that I painted one of his locomotives, and I just haven't returned it to him, but he hasn't asked for it either. But at the same time, I'm willing to paint one of his locomotives again because it's certainly a worthwhile paint. So there's one there. So any comments? Have any of you actually tried the Proto paints before, or is that that's something new? Oh yeah, John Arthur, you're the one thing is like use the best paint for the job, and if that means you're going to be using where are we here? If you're going to be using Vallejo Panzer Aces, then use it because if it's the best for what you're doing, by all means do it. I mean. So Mike, you have the action red, so you've got the companion color to this one, and wanting to give that a try. I mean, it's a Canadian line, but I think many of you are probably aware of the stuff that Rapido Trains is doing. And I think they're trying to occupy that gap of actually providing prototypical colors, and that's the one thing that this paint line has over all the others. Now I want to toss another thing in front of here. So let's talk about the fact that I am a gamer nerd, and there, Games Workshop. It's part of the Citadel line, but this. It was interesting. We had this in the same sort of problem of a paint line being discontinued. In about 2012, Games Workshop completely revamped their entire paint line. So all the colors that we were familiar with, all the names, everything else, that changed. The company was still in business, but they started putting out a different style and a different means of paint. And so I have some of the previous ones. They've not really lasted all that well, but this is part of the new line. And so let me just show you kind of how some of that works. I'm going to pull that one there. So this is one of my favorite rust colors that I've used for rust. It's called Mournfang Brown. And you probably can't read it because it's really dark. But notice the color of the label. It's red. Beside that is this is a color called Scrag Brown, also a really good rust color. This is in a similar color family, but this is what's called a base color, and then the blue one is called a layer. So the layer is ever so slightly translucent, whereas the base color is completely opaque. And then they also have another color, and this one I just got to read the label here. It's called Deathclaw Brown. And these are just successive layers of brown. So if you wanted to do, like if you were painting, say, a leather color or something like that, you would start with the base and then paint it, and then layer these ones over top of it to give a good style to it. But that wasn't enough. Then they decided that maybe if you wanted to do a real highlight, then you have what are called these edge paints. Oops, I'm gonna put that over there. Now I'm actually running out of room, and I'm gonna run out of room on the camera here. So we've got that. However, those aren't the only things in the line. In addition to that, they also have acrylic washes, and in addition to that, they also have what are called dry compounds. They are intended for dry brushing, and very, very, very useful. That I mean, you can do dry brushing with a regular paint. You can just take a little bit on a paper towel and away you go. This stuff is designed for it, so it's when you do dry brush it, it goes on rather smooth. But then they also have what are called oops, let's go this side. They're called technical paints. And the technical paints have some additional quality to them. This one is called Nylon oxide, and that is if you're doing a bronze statue or something like that. If you are doing copper corrosion, this is a good way to do it with an acrylic paint. So if you've got something that's painted copper but you want to show it as corroded, that's something you can use, and that's fine. Now, They also have, in addition to that, something called texture paint. Now, I've just thrown, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at least 5 different styles of paint. These texture paints are often used for bases and scenery. One of these technical paints, I don't happen to have it, but if you ever want to do a dried mud effect on your layout, it's perfect. I mean, it goes on, it's the right color, and when it dries, it kind of gives that kind of cracked mud sort of look. And none other than Luke Towan himself has actually used that particular paint to create a really neat dried mud effect on one of his dioramas. I don't know, you might have seen that, but again, there's a lot of variety inside that. But again, that's just because, and the reason that I have so many of them is because that's the paint line I really I kind of cut my teeth on. I primarily use those for brush painting. They do airbrush well. You can thin them with alcohol-based thinners, you can airbrush them. They're primarily intended for brush painting, but they do work. Now, Games Workshop has also come out with an air line as well. I've not tried those yet, despite the fact that I'm a Games Workshop nerd as far as their paints are concerned. But that kind of worked out. That sort of worked out well. Anyway, any comments on these before I go? I'm gonna bring the chat the chat back over, and just to see if any of you have some of the comments that you might have had. So of the paints that I've suggested, now there's obviously several paints that I haven't mentioned yet, and I'm going to be doing that. But any thoughts on some of the paints that you use that you prefer working with? Any particular pitfalls or things that you've had when working with these paints? So I'm just gonna let it go there. I'm gonna let the chat window go there while I line up. I'm just gonna line up something else. Just a couple of varieties of things as I'm putting it out there. Okay. Ben, with the dry brush paints, I actually managed to rejuvenate it, and it, oddly enough, I left it downstairs, but I picked up not that long ago a Badger battery powered paint mixer. Like I had a paint called Necron Compound, which is one of the dry paints that has a really nice. It's great for metallics. I'm actually going to be using it on the roof of the boxcar that I've been working on, and I did manage to rejuvenate it, oddly enough, with a battery powered Badger mixer that I only recently I found it on sale not too long ago and decided to work with it, and it rejuvenates paints in general. I was able to put it in there. I think I put maybe 1 or 2 drops of water just to kind of get reactivate the compound a little bit, and then use this paint mixer and that seemed that actually did rejuvenate it. But actually, Ben, that's a great topic. Maybe that's something worthwhile in video. How do we rejuvenate old paints? Like, I suspect that this polyscale, which here, let me just hold that one upside down. You're seeing that all the pigment is totally settled in that one. So, Mike. Oh yeah, the Create FX paints, and various other ones. Okay, so yeah, so Ben, do you actually have a battery, one of those battery powered mixers? I mean, they're anywhere from 16 to $20 Canadian anyway, for that. Yeah. Yeah, and John, I mean, Vallejo is a great line. Um, uh, it, the I certainly don't dispute it. I mean, I discovered the hard way that Vallejo model color, and frankly, I think most of the Vallejo paints do not play well with other people's thinners. And so, my bit of advice is if you're using Vallejo, you need to go all the way, use all of their materials. But Ben, yeah, maybe that's something that you can look at investing in, because I mean, admittedly, I only just picked up this paint mixer not too long ago. Curiously enough, the reason that I picked it up is I saw, pardon me, Roy Smith used it on his channel, the N Scale Evanston subdivision, and I thought, I should look into getting one of those. And I tried it, and it's kind of like, why didn't I have? I've been painting for 20 years. Why haven't I had one of these things before? Yeah, and Luke Towan did a do-it-yourself shaker. That's rather impressive. But certainly having something that you can stick in there and mix, I think really helped there. So yeah, so Ben, as I said, I did manage to rejuvenate my Necron compound using the battery powered mixer and a couple drops of water. So that was a great question. If you asked that 2 months ago, I would have said I have no idea. But I certainly managed to do that. I Ben, yes, like you could probably add a BB to the bottle. Curiously enough, some of the paints from particularly from Ammo by Mig, as well as in this. Oh, here, let me go back. I need to go back to my little mini cam here. Just give me a second. Okay, back to the mini cam. All right, so the AK Interactive paints, some of the ones from these from both AK Interactive and Ammo by Mig come with little ball bearings already in them that you can use to shake them up. It's mostly the Ammo by Mig ones. I don't think this one has one that's a shaker, but their bottles are basically the same kind of shape, but there is a BB inside it. And now the only thing is, probably a steel ball bearing would probably work better, because I'm not sure if you necessarily want to put lead into that, but it certainly would work. And the so that can certainly be a possibility. I'm trying to make sure that I'm catching everything. I'm gonna pop this back over to over the chat window. So that's certainly a possibility. Now, curiously enough, I'm gonna put a couple of paints here that my daughter's been using, but I initially picked up for myself. And as you can see, she's made extensive use of it. She's 13, a budding artist. She's much more skilled at her age than I was when I was 13. And the thing is that I wasn't too bad, but in comparison, how many of you have actually used these golden acrylic paints? You've probably seen these in Michael's. These are basically the top of the line acrylic paints that you can get, and how many of you have heard of a guy by the name of Rob Arsenault? He has a website called Weather My Trains, and I mean, he runs a professional business of a professional business of painting and weathering trains, and he uses exclusively these golden acrylics for what he does, and he mixes in his own colors. The reason that I put these three out here is that you have the magenta, cyan, and yellow. These are primary colors. In other words, if you have this plus black and white, you can mix any color you want just from that. And so that becomes a way to do it. And of course, Megan saw that and she took them, and I have no idea how much is actually left in any of these bottles, but these are great acrylic paints. They also do something called what are called high flow paints, and I'll have to lie that over sideways. But this is for these ones are intended more for airbrushing and the like. I've actually painted a locomotive for my club using this particular color. I don't have a picture of it on hand, but we go from there. So the Tough Railroad Texas Unforgettable Fallen Flags. Yes, a stainless steel nut. The great idea. And yes, you're absolutely right. That nut with the hole in the center, you won't work. It doesn't it won't clog it. That's a really great suggestion. Yes, Mike. Rob Arsenault is quite good. I mean, I've met him. Curiously enough, I actually did a building commission for him a little while back, a grain elevator complex that I had partially painted up for him to then take and take to the next level. Joe, welcome, and my first moderator is in. So, yep, there's the wrench, and you guys have been behaving yourself quite well, but now. Now that the enforcer's here, well, I'm not sure if he's necessarily an enforcer, but Joe, good to have you here, and welcome. And we're just in the middle of talking about the different paints, and Train Guy 56, welcome. Having a few more people creeping in at the 7:30 mark. Great to have you on board. We've been talking about some paints. I mean, hopefully you can catch this in some of the replay. But we've been talking about some of the paints that have been discontinued. I gave my own personal big spiel about the Games Workshop paints and how many different inside that line, how many different paints there are and what they can be used for. But and I just finished talking about the golden acrylics that Rob Arsenault in Edmonton uses. Yes, Joe. Everybody's been really great. It's been quite fun. I guess if a few, I'm gonna do. I hate to do this, but anyway, here's my shameless plug again. There's a Teespring T-shirt with "In Training" on it, with my little logo on it. So anyway, I'm gonna enough of that. Okay, so I'm just gonna have my my mini cam ready to go. So I guess now. There's a lot of new paints out there, and some of these I've just been trying to work with, and of course here let's just kind of set up. I'm assuming that most of you are at least familiar with, even if you haven't used it, of the Tamiya line. And that really these are colors that mostly military modelers tend to use. This is red, although truthfully this red is actually completely dried out. I've used it all up, and then hull red, and the hull red, if you're doing kind of doing an undercoat for rust colors and things like that. Oh, and there's my son. Can everybody hear Ian? Yeah. Anyway, he's playing loudly. Yes, and the one thing is Tamiya are great airbrush paints. Yeah, everybody's saying hi to Ian, but as I said, he's just over there, and he's been pretty good. But he also takes after his father very well, in that he plays loudly, and he has just decided that he is now playing with his Lego, so. You might see him show up. Right now is actually his bedtime. And but I'm going to let him stay up until I'm more or less finished here, so we'll just kind of go with it. Yes, kids should absolutely play loud, which is lots of fun. Yeah, great. And I wouldn't have it any other way. Anyway, so the Tamiya line are. I've tried brush painting with the Tamiya, and admittedly, they're not really great for doing brush work. The brush work I'll leave to things like the Games Workshop, the Vallejo,
Dad, something happened. The
what?
boy fell out of the police car.
Oh, okay.
He fell out.
Now he's narrating his calls to me. Anyway, so the Tamiya are great. I like use them for airbrushing, but of course there's this new line, at least new to me, is the AK Interactive. Real color line. Now, AK Interactive does an acrylic line, and then they do these. These are called acrylic lacquers, which, curiously enough, acrylic lacquers are exactly what the Tamiya paints are, and I've even tried this. You can mix the acrylic lacquers with the Tamiya paints directly, no problems at all. It works out well. Sparky 107, welcome. The great to see the fellow Canadians here. And especially someone of your stature, Sparky. So thank you for checking in. Anyway, I've just gotten to these to talking about these AK Interactive lines, and when I was in the store, when I was contemplating buying them for the first time, someone said, "Oh, don't use the Tamiya X28 thinner. It didn't really work all that well." So I was under the impression that these were lacquer only paints, but I wanted to give them a try anyway. I've since discovered they thin well with denatured alcohol. So the Tamiya X28 they should be fine with, and of course the Tamiya lacquer thinner. They have their own thinner, but I haven't managed to get my hands on it yet. But the one thing I have discovered about these AK ones is that what they don't react well with is water. For whatever reason, as soon as they hit water, they kind of congeal up very, very quickly. So you want to make sure that. Yes, the Sparky. I'm going to put this shout out to you. I've got the prototype or the Proto paint. I have happened to use. There's another exclamation from Ian. So now, where can you get the AK Interactive paint? Well, one thing that I'm going to do that I haven't got a chance to yet, that if you want to, after I finish the live stream, I'll put some links below that you can buy them on Amazon. And what I'll do is I can add a link there and put them there. My local hobby shop just started carrying them. That's how I learned about them. I didn't even know that they had them. And what they have is they've got kind of their base color line, which is what I'm most interested in. They also have a clear coat, a clear flat, a clear gloss, but they also have a clear satin that Tamiya doesn't do. So that there's some gaps there that you can use them in conjunction with your Tamiya paints rather than as a replacement for. So really bright thinking on their part. I think that was a really, really good throw. Mike, the local hobby shop that carries them here in Calgary is PM Hobbycraft. So PM Hobbycraft has these. They're starting to get a little picked over. I hope they're getting a new shipment in. I'm going to go tomorrow and see if I can pick up a few. But they've got things like Off-White. But in addition to that, especially if you do things like armor and aircraft, they've got an entire line dedicated to armor, and those are precise color match to armor, precise color match to aircraft. Now, for those of us in model railroading, we have to adjust a little bit, kind of mix our own, choose ones that work well. I'm using this pale blue for that boxcar that you saw me do the salt. Okay. So what's...
He fell down.
Well, why don't you pick him up, bud?
No, I can't.
You can't pick him up. Okay.
Because
Just doing a quick station identification while I pick this up. Okay. Where are we here? Okay.
Dad, I mean a human.
Oh, well, you're gonna have to go down and find him, okay?
No, I don't need.
He calls Lego minifigures humans. I suppose we could be called worse. Anyway, this yeah. So yeah. Okay, Mike. So yeah. Just go and check out PM Hobbycraft, because I mean they've got a lot of the different paints as well. But if you want to, if you can't find it in your own place, when I finish the live stream, I'll make sure that you can get some links there. Now, that having been said, you could also check out the link. Check out my previous video in terms of the salt weathering, because I do have a link to this particular paint, and that will at least get you there.
No, I only checked.
Okay. Well, he's going to have to sit down there for a little while, bud. So,
Dad, you have to
yes, so Sparky does make a great point. The one, if you are looking for actual prototype colors, now these happen to be Canadian colors because they have what I have, but I think Sparky, do they? I'm pretty sure they've got like a CSX blue, do they not? I have to double check. I'm going to be because these here in Calgary are available at trains and such. But again, I'll make sure that there are you have links to all of these paint lines by the time that that this goes to the replay mode. So yeah. And let's see now a couple of ancillary paints. Also, of course, oil paints. This is just your basic Winsor Newton, probably your good mid-range oil paints there. This tube I bought like 8 years ago. You don't need a tube this big. It's going to last you quite a long time. And similarly, the more specialty ones, these Abtulung oil paints, these are great. This is the light rust and dark rust. Again, I bought these like 8-9 years ago, and look at how much I still have. And I've done a lot of weathering just with these. These will last you forever. Again, I'll make sure that I include down there. Another one, if you're into gaming at all, this is just a little shout out to Privateer Press. These are great, densely pigmented paints from Privateer Press. They make a game called War Machine and Hordes. They're kind of, it's an interchangeable kind of game, but that's one there. Badger Model Flex. Well, guess what I happen to have? I've got one bottle of that. So I'm trying to make sure. Like, I think I can put most of the paints you guys are talking about in front of you here. The one thing is generally paints that are intended for airbrushing don't work as well for brushing and sort of vice versa. But generally the airbrush paints that work for airbrushing work really well. And that, I think that's one of the things to make sure to consider. This one is too big to put in front of the camera, but this is the Stynylrez primer. This comes in a number of colors, but you saw me use this back in the primer one. If you're using primer through an airbrush, this is great stuff. Works really well. Anyway, Tough Railroad, Texas. Thank you for the reminder of this one. I have not tried this. This came to me as part of the, hey, John, here, you use paint. So this is on my list, and this is a neat dust. This one is actually a neat dust color that I'm definitely want to try. Now I also happen to have here. This is something that somebody else gave me. I'm going to just put this out to a little broader here. There we go. So you can actually see this. This is something from Iwata Media, which is intended as a weathering kit. And there's like, just looking at that, there's 10 paints in this package. Notice it's fully sealed. I haven't actually opened it yet, but this is on my to-do list in terms of wanting something to try. And it's from Medea, which is the Iwata paint line. So here's something I have. I've not tried it. It doesn't belong to me. It was gifted to me to try. So I am going to give it a try and maybe report on it at some point. But it's kind of new to me, so I get to play around with this. And then we also have, in addition to that, the actual weathering specialty stuff, and that's also inclusive of both the ammo by MiG, the original MiG production stuff, which is actually owned by AK Interactive. There's some bad blood between these two, between the companies because of what happened here, but as a result, the competition is really fierce, and therefore these two companies are cranking out. And AK Interactive is also part of this mix, because AK Interactive actually owns the MiG Productions brand at the moment, even though Mig Jimenez, who invented the stuff, has his own company. And oddly enough, the bad blood between this is great for us modelers, because it's they're really competitive in terms of getting some really good products out there. So. Oh yeah, Sparky. The one thing is if you're doing weathering, you don't have to have an airbrush. I mean, I do have an airbrush. I do use it a lot. I do recommend it, but you don't have to have it. Speaking of which, I actually wanted to mention this on just basic craft paint. If you're doing scenery, this is all you need. You do not need golden acrylics for scenery painting. You need basic craft paint for doing scenery. But there's a website.
Oh! Daddy was under the trap!
Okay, thank you, Ian.
I
Sorry, I don't know how to follow that one up. Okay. Sorry, I was just distracted by that. There's a website out there called the Rust Bucket Weathering Forums. Now, you actually have to join the forum in order to actually read anything on it. And these are the people that I look up to for weathering, and that there are some really good quality people who have done some really high quality weathering stuff. And there's a technique, and a lot of them, they don't use an airbrush at all. And one of the techniques that they've done is kind of this. It's almost like it's an acrylic fade that works really well just with basic craft paint. And ironically, the reason it works so well is because the pigment isn't as dense in these. And so because of that, because the pigment isn't as dense, they can actually create a fading effect with it that you wouldn't be able to do if you were using, say, Golden Acrylic or the Games Workshop or any of the other ones. You might get away with it with some of the Games Workshop layer paints because of the way they tend to be a little bit more translucent. But, there's an example of where you can do some really, really effective weathering just with craft paint. Scale Code by Minuteman. Admittedly, I have not tried Scale Coat. I've had a lot of people recommend it, and part of it's just its availability. I've not seen a place where it's available for me to just simply take a bottle home and try. The whole reason that let's just move that over a little bit. The whole reason that I've used the AK Interactive is because my local hobby shop had it. And I can say that I've used it and I can recommend it. But the scale coat, curiously enough, even PM Hobbycraft here, which has a lot of varieties of paint, I mean, they also have, where are we here? They also happen to have the Model Master. Sorry, Ian put that little figure there, by the way. They also have the Model Master, but I don't think they have the scale coat. They do have another paint line called Mission Models, which I've not tried yet, but I've heard a lot of good things about. So, yes, Philip. So you've now tried the Style Reds primers. Now, I will also admit I have not used the Vallejo primers yet. I've heard a lot of good things about them, but I haven't had a chance to use that. One of the things that I want to try is particularly when it comes to painting trucks. You might notice that I don't have a video on painting trucks yet. And what I want to do is I want to try the Style Res primers and actually do a test with this with a white Style Res primer over the plastic trucks that I'm going to end up using for the blue boxcar as a test to see whether or not the Style Res primer actually works on a Delrin type plastic. Because one of the big things is it's really difficult to get the paint to stick to it. Ralph Renzetti and Ron Marsh both recommend like a Rust-Oleum camouflage primer, or basically Rust-Oleum camouflage spray paint to do that. And I'm really curious if something like the Style Res or some of the other polyurethane paints might actually work with that. By the way, that's my wife Sarah in the background. Okay, so okay. Oh, tough railroad. Don't apologize for referencing this, but yes, there are color references charts that are out there. AK Interactive in releasing their real color line actually has a chart right on their website of compatible ones that are, like, for example, it'll tell you the Tamiya equivalent of some of these paints. It'll tell you, I think, it'll also tell you the Vallejo, some of the Vallejo equivalents, and because of that, then you can tie it into, say, something like there's an ultimate paint conversion chart there that will tell you what the equivalent of. Maybe I need to link that in down below afterwards as well. The ultimate paint conversion chart. Now it is dated because it has certain paint lines that are no longer exist. In fact, I think I've got another one of the vintage paints. This is an enamel I have never tried, but has ended up in my library called Pactra. Anyway, so there we go. And oh yeah, another paint that it's not really a paint, but Winsor Newton ink. You need to have. This is a great thing to have in your arsenal. That's India ink, and so if you're making your own washes, it's a little old school, as Ralph Renzetti mentioned, but it certainly is a good start. But yeah, so self-etching primer found in a rattle can for painting Delrin plastic. I'm going to switch this over to chat again. So paint using paint markers. You can, to a certain degree. Now, there's a couple of things that I'm still on my list of things to try. Watercolor pencil crayons are, if you're doing skin textures, if you want to get a kind of a translucent skin, they're really good to do that kind of vein work over it. And when you spray on top of it, it can actually create that illusion of depth. And so I was thinking, I could probably use those watercolors to actually create water streaks. Sorry, you probably heard that one. Also, there's a new thing that I haven't tried from Ammo by MIG, and the Ammo they have something called oil brushers, which are basically pre-mixed oils. Oil paints that you can use for streaking or for shading or for dot fading. They're kind of they're pre-mixed and done. Yes, watercolor pencil crayons are a thing. I have some in the house. I don't have them here, but I do actually have them. They do exist. And like I haven't, for example, I've not tried watercolor paints. I'm curious about those. I've not tried what are called gouache paints. Gouache. It's French, so it's pronounced gouache. And they're not acrylics, they're not oils, but apparently they share characteristics of both. I'm wanting to give that a try. So, yeah, John, it's kind of like all the things, all the paints, use all the paints, use whatever works. To a certain degree, that's true. I've always said the best paint for the job. And that's part of it. Wow, there's 23 people here. Thank you for giving me this much attention. It's not quite the same as say Steve Brown's show, but it's been great with all of this. Now I'm trying to catch up with everything on chat to make sure that I'm mentioning something. Yes, absolutely. When it comes to paints, there are certain things in terms of trial for trial and error. I mean, for me, the big error that I can actually that I can say is my experience of using Vallejo model colors and thinking that it was gonna work through my airbrush with an alcohol-based thinner. Boy, was I wrong. It took me a while to clean out my airbrush. I mean, it didn't destroy the airbrush, but it certainly freaked me out because it just suddenly started to turn it to glue. The other thing is the AK interactive paint. Don't mix it with water. Alcohol or lacquer will definitely work. There we go. So yeah, there are some things that their errors are certainly worth notice, and but if you're going to use Vallejo, I mean, Vallejos are great paints, they really are. Just make sure that if you're using it, you need to kind of keep inside their playing field. On the other hand, as I was pleased to mention, is that really nice discovery that Tamiya and the AK interactive paints, they play very well together. They're both what are called acrylic lacquers, and they do work really well. And if you're going to be airbrushing, I will highly recommend them. Is there anything else in my little pile here that I haven't necessarily that I might have missed? So I'm just let's go back over to chat. There you go, Andy. You have provided the answer to this, and Andy came on fairly early in the show, and I wanted to give a special shout out to him. Andy, are you entering the Down and Dirty Weathering contest again this year? Hope you are, because you did the roofs to your looks like I might buffering. Good, you are entering. I'm glad to hear it. Here's the Down and Dirty Weathering contest plug again. And just to make sure that if you haven't entered, consider entering it. And please do that. Oh, and I almost forgot. How many of you have entered into my 1,000 subscriber giveaway? That I'm actually giving away rather than an item, I'm giving away a service. In other words, if you enter, the first draw is going to be, I get to weather up one of your rail cars of your choice. You send it to me and I weather it if your name is the first draw. And if you're the second draw, you get the main prize, which is a I get to weather one of your locomotives, and it's any scale up to O scale. I debated whether or not to include G scale, but then again, just north of us, there's an Iron Horse Park, and they're 1 inch scale. I mean, they're enormous trains, and that would be a little much, because I did say that I would. You have to get it to me, but I'd have to ship it back, and that might get a little pricey. Okay, so Ben, yeah, the difference with acrylic lacquer, truthfully, I'm not sure exactly what the chemical composition is, but that oops, looks like I'm getting a little bit of a red signal here. Am I buffering? It kind of went a little red on me. So part of the one thing is. Let's bring my little inset back, and so the both the AK Interactive and this are they're referred to as acrylic lacquers, that they can be thinned as if they're acrylic paints, but there's something in them, and if you'll notice, at least on the Tamiya one here, it says it's flammable. Most acrylics are not flammable, so there's something in it, and where are we here? And also the AK Interactive ones are also flammable, and but I don't actually have the chemical composition on this, so they sort of self-refer to them as acrylic lacquers, but you know, these basically are a very similar chemical composition to each other. Okay, so the okay. I missed a comment between Joe G and Philip Wyman about getting an idea from the Mud Father himself with Ralph Renzetti. So, Sparky, thank you very much for checking in. It is 8 o'clock. I'm just going to do a quick wrap up. Yes, the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest is going to be a blast. Just the shout out to Andy. He did a sponge painting with oils. I have to admit, I have never done sponge painting with oils. And, you know, it's kind of like, I've done sponge painting with acrylics and I've used oil paints. And I was looking at it going, why didn't I think of that? So anyway, I just wanted to kind of give a shout out, saying that I learned a lot from the Down and Dirty Weathering Contest. And as I said, I'd venture to say that I probably learned more than people might have learned from me. So not a problem, Sparky. Thank you very much for checking in. It is about 10 o'clock your time, and just keeping an eye on that. I'm just going to do my last little shameless plug for the for my new T-shirt, but really I'm just going to bring it back to chat before we kind of check out for the night. Thank you very much for checking into my live stream. My next official live stream that I know that I'm going to be doing is the actual draw for my 1,000 subscriber giveaway. That's an absolute for sure. But on the other hand, I may do one between now and then. One of the reasons why I didn't release one of my regular videos today is the truth is I was sick last Friday and had to go into the hospital to check me out. It turns out food poisoning. Joy. And I'm still dealing with some of the after effects for that. So you're going to see the boxcar hopefully for next week, but I've got a couple things on the go. So Train Guy 56, yes. If you've never weathered anything, it never hurts to try. Hopefully, those of us who've done it before have given you some things to consider. Just don't start with your most expensive model. Go into a bargain bin, find a anything, and just try it out. And I think that's the big thing. Big thing to do. And John, so John, you're following my so-called my 8-step process. That's great to hear. Once you get comfortable with that, you can then start improvising and kind of going literally off the rails for your different ones. So by all means, try it. Try it on a cheap car. Sometimes if you're not sure on a certain technique, sometimes it's helpful to actually like just take a piece of plastic card and just test it on that, which is a great chance to do that. So good. Thanks Ben for that you've enjoyed that. I think I'm just going to start getting ready to wrap this up. I have my son is up a half hour past his bedtime. And we do need to actually have him go to bed at some point, and I also need to go pick up my daughter from Pathfinders at 8:30, which is about half an hour from now. So anyway, I'm glad everybody had a chance to learn something. I mean, part of this is a lot, as somebody else mentioned, it's trial and error. This is stuff that I've tried. The one real advantage to going to a brick and mortar shop in this case is to actually just pull one off the shelf and take it home and give it a try. Go into Michael's. Try one of their paints. I mean, if you've never tried the golden acrylics, they are good. And you can really do some nice work there. The high flow paints, they've got some colors that you can't that are a little more conventional, but at the same time that you can't find anywhere else. Oh yeah, and also the golden acrylic. They also have things like modeling paste and gloss gel. If you're doing things like scenery, that's great stuff for it. So. Yeah. So train guard, and so you're still. Are you? Let me know offline about your airbrush issues. Hopefully, we can kind of get that resolved. So just contact me, chat, Facebook, through the Facebook page, and yes, I may as well. Just in terms of Facebook and my Instagram account, if you want to do that. I'm kind of new to this whole doing different social media things, and this has grown a whole lot faster than I really ever expected it to. So, what I guess I am gonna wrap it up here. But thank you so much, everyone, for checking in and being here tonight. It's been a great chat. I'm beginning to understand. I mean, I didn't have nearly as many as either Ron Marsh or Steve Brown in terms of the live stream going past. But boy, I just trying to make sure that I'm kind of catching up with that. So. With that, thank you very much for coming. Watch out for the next videos that I have. Check out the links down below and come back and check out the live stream again, because I'm hoping that probably by the end of tonight I'll actually have the different links to paints, if you can't find them locally, that you could buy them through Amazon. I'll just put some links down there. And if you like the shirt, it's one of 4 designs. Go check out my Teespring store just for the fun of it. I thought, hey, that would be kind of a fun thing to do. So with that, I'm going to say that good luck and may you keep on track.